All right, Patricia, are we all set?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Gabriela Byerly, and this is the EPNet plus IES present a case study for collaboration. Thank you for joining us. On behalf of the Boston Society of Architects and the IES Boston and Rhode Island section, we welcome you. Let me chat a little bit about who we are and who puts this event together. As I said, my name is Gabriela Byerly. I am an associate at Arrow Street in Boston, and I am a co-chair for the Emerging Professionals Network. Our group is a committee of the Boston Society for Architecture. We do a lot of events that target career growth and professional education, professional development, and networking for young professionals. This is one of our events that we've been looking forward to hosting for a long time now, since last year, and we're so happy to be partnering with IES. And I'm going to let Stefano introduce their group.
Hi everybody, I'm Stefano Amabile from the IES, and I'm a senior designer at HLB Lighting here in Boston from the Boston office. And I'm here today to represent, I'm the chairperson for the IES, for the Emerging Professional Chair for the IES, that is Illuminating Engineering Society, for the section of Boston and Rhode Island. So we are a non-profit organization dedicated to all aspects of what is concerned to art and the science of lighting. So what we do and what is exactly IES, for those of you who doesn't know, I feel like in the list of person, a lot of, there are a few students. So IES, we're a technical authority about illumination and lighting. And we started like beginning of the 1900s. So we are for over a century now, our main objective and our goal was to spread the knowledge and experience of lighting. And our group is a very diverse group that includes engineers, architects, lighting designers, of course, students, very welcome students, and contractors, manufacturers. And we're very happy today to participate and to organize this event with BSA, absolutely. And we hope you will enjoy this presentation. And one nice fact of this presentation, we choose to present this big project that is the Noble and Greenhow Library of Science project. That the peculiarity of this project is he won both an IES award and a BSA award. So both from an architectural and the lighting point of view, this is a very good case study to present it, to show, and for all of you that are interested in lighting and architecture, it's a very nice project.
Great, thank you, Stefano. Let me move on here. So some Zoom notes, please everyone keep muted. We appreciate that. Feel free to ask any questions using the chat function. We will move on to the panel presentation after the fact. So if you submitted a question during your sign up, please make sure, we'll make sure that that gets asked during the panel discussion. And if not, please weigh in for the Q&A after the presentation. This session will be recorded and shared in a few days. And then if you would like to receive a continuing education, which is 1.5 learning units, or a certificate, please fill out the short form that's linked on the chat. Thank you, Patricia, our BSA top-notch representative, who's helping us put all of this together and managing the AA continuing ed stuff. So on to our panelists. We have an amazing group of people here who have been so kind to work with us in putting this thing together. We have Paul Governor and Andrew Jonick with William Rowan Associates, and they were the architects for the project. We have Ben Markham with Centec, who's the director of architectural acoustics, and we have Carrie Hawley, the senior principal of HLB Lighting Design here in Boston. I'll leave a few minutes for them to introduce themselves. Paul, go ahead. Why don't you start?
Andy, take it away.
Oh, sure. I'm Andy Jonick. I'm a senior associate with William Rowan Associates, and worked on the Noble and Greenough project, really from the interview all the way through completion.
I'm Paul Governor, also with William Rowan Associates, project architect, worked with Andy on the project. Also, I would say from schematic design through completion.
I'm Ben Markham. I'm with Ascentech, and we were the acoustics consultants on the project. I worked in collaboration with my colleague Rosemary Sue on this project, starting in schematic design and through construction.
And I am Carrie Hawley. I'm a senior principal of HLB Lighting Design. And I see that my former teammate who worked on this project, maybe Barrett Newell, who's with Canon Design now, joined us on the call. So Barrett also is here, which I'm thrilled. And she did a lot of this work. So I'm sure she may be able to chime in with some feedback too. But I was the principal in charge of the project and got involved. Similarly to Ben, we were brought in as a consultant early when we got started in the schematic design and went all the way through CA.
Great. Thank you all. Let me move on to the presentation by Paul and Andy. Are you seeing my landing page?
Yes, thank you.
So whenever you need the slide, just say next slide.
Thanks, Gabriella. So this is the Noble and Greenough project. It consisted of a couple of things. One was a new library, which also included classrooms, also a renovation of their science facility with a new addition to it, and really overall kind of a redesign of their the academic portion of campus. If you could go to the next slide. Sorry, Gabriella, why don't we just go back one slide to the beginning. The image you see here, that's known as the castle. This is a piece of land that was bought late 1800s, early 1900s, and gentleman, I've forgotten his name, but hired H.H. Richardson to construct a residence for himself. And I think he, lived in it for, I think, if I remember correctly, 20 or 30 years. Passed away, in the Noble and Greenough, which was located in Boston, bought the castle and used that as the primary school building. And since the school moved out to this, this is in Dedham, it's right along a bend in the Charles River. They've expanded the campus, and not only was the castle designed by H.H. Richardson, but the landscape and the grounds around the castle was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. So it was a great opportunity to work in a setting where both of those very well-known architects originally worked. So as you can imagine, the campus is it's set into this natural woodland. This is the campus itself is on this very rocky knoll that is there's granite and ledge everywhere. The castle was built into the south-facing slope facing the Charles River. All the athletic fields are down in the floodplain. So behind the castle is some of the academic buildings. Go to the next slide, Gabriella. So there are these iconic rock outcroppings everywhere. Here you can see, you're looking through the white pines towards the castle. The rest of campus is behind the photographer in this photo. And there are these moments on campus where you move from clearings into the woodland and then back out into other clearings. You can go to the next slide. This is a view before our project was built. The image on the left, you can see it's a Stubbins designed library. There's some white pines in the distance, and that small green space on that image on the left, that's known as the beach, and that was really the kind of major flat green space where students hung out, after lunch or if they had a free period. So not very big. Next slide. The image on the left shows the campus before we were involved. So the Putnam Library was slated for demolition, and the new building would contain, the 10,000 volumes that were in there, new circulation, and some classrooms. The science building is on the left, known as Baker Science. That arrow is the main entrance, which opened up to the side of Pratt Middle School. So our intervention is shown on the right, where we carefully positioned the new Putnam Library so that there are entrances off of a main campus pathway, and we designed a new addition to the Baker Science Building so that there was this central campus clearing with the entrances of these buildings fronting either the clearing, or you can see to the right of the Putnam Library a wide walkway that's a major pedestrian path that leads to the castle. So, there's a major entrance from the library to that pathway. Okay, you can go to the next slide. This shows it's a two-story building on the left. The large yellow volume in the upper right of the first floor plan, that's known as the active reading room. And then down the lower right is the quiet study room. So there are these two kind of key elements to the library. And we met with, many meetings with faculty, with staff, students. One of the things that was really important was the presence of books and the connection to nature. So the right side of the plan there's a lot of glass, bringing light into the building, but also maintaining views to campus. And on the left, the back edge of the library was a wall of books. The library is also interconnected to the classrooms. You can see 2 orange classrooms on the left, and there's a small second story with 4 classrooms. So this shows the finished building in the evening, and as you can see, the campus, the beach is now much larger. There's the central campus green. The buildings front one another. The entrances open onto the green, trying to create this kind of intimately scaled campus civic space. There's still a presence of the woodland. Over time, you can see a couple of the trees in front of the library. That's the active reading room there. Those trees will mature, and this building will settle into the landscape as time goes on. We worked carefully with Ben and his team and Carrie and Barrett on all aspects, each room in this building, but particularly the reading room that you see there, to create that ambient glow at night. And it's an active reading room where there are students talking in there, so engineering the ceiling to absorb, set the acoustics so it's just right and absorb sound. All right, next slide. This is a view of that reading room looking back out towards the green. The wood on the upper walls is a wood grill to reduce glare, morning glare coming into the room in the morning. That large window faces north. So that's where you have that grand view out to the landscape. All right, next slide, Gabriella. This is a view in that same room looking south. You can see, just make out the castle in the distance and looking out to a wooden landscape. We actually talked to some alumni, and they had memories of sitting in the old library studying and just deep in thought, looking out to the woods. That's something they had remembered from their high school days. Here again is that active reading room. All right, next slide, Gabriella. This is a view that shows the reading room in the foreground and the quiet study room in the background on the left. Here's another view the quiet study room. And you can see there's a perimeter desk in there with light bulbs hanging over each of the students' heads. That was something we worked. These, like Carrie, these are bright students. They probably have a lot of good ideas. So why not put a clear looking light bulb right over their head? It's a minimal design. It doesn't, when you're in the room, you see them, but they don't draw attention to themselves. And that was important because we're maintaining those views out to the landscape. Next slide. This is a view of the classroom side of the library, where there are a couple of classrooms on the left. We had an exposed acoustic deck structural ceiling. So again, that's another area where we had to work very closely with Carrie and Ben to organize that ceiling, make it as clean as possible. Also, deeply engage the mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers to organize the utilities and keep it as clean as it's shown in that photograph. This is one of it's known as an innovation classroom. It's really larger than the typical Nobles classroom, so they can meet in groups. The furniture is completely rearrangeable, and these classrooms are different than some of the others, due to the exposed ceiling. And again, this is an acoustic structural deck shown in this image. Moving on to the Baker Science Building, the major intervention here was the addition, which you can see on the lower left. It's a physics workshop, 2 of them stacked on top of one another, where they can do experiments. There's also, it's used after hours for project-based learning. The right side of that floor plan are the existing classrooms, and the goal there was, it was very dark. It was actually extremely dark in the hallway, somewhat claustrophobic. You couldn't see into the classrooms. It was lined with, cubbies that were unused for coats and for book bags. So the idea was to put science on display and open it up. You could go to the next slide, Gabriella. The view on the top shows the original condition, that very dark hallway, and then our intervention below, where it was just floor to ceiling glass, looking into the classroom, seeing the activity, bringing light. You can't see the windows in that image, but both of those classrooms have pretty large windows, so bringing that light into the center of the building along the hallway. And then the next image. This shows those stacked workshops on the right, physics workshops. The blue steel armature in the ceiling is it's a framework for experiments. They can attach. We were in there one day once the building was in use, and they had all sorts of things hanging from that steel. And then you can see the image on the left is what it looks like at night, that new transparent entrance facing campus, and the 2 physics workshops, very highly visible from that campus green. I think that might be it.
That's what we had. So I'm just gonna ask our panelists to be on camera, and then everybody else, if you want to turn your camera off, that would be great.
I'll also say Paul was deeply involved. He worked a lot on the science building during design, but Paul really did all of the day-to-day work through construction administration, working with the contractors, making sure the design intent was kept intact. So Hopefully, if you have any questions about that experience, Paul can answer them. But he did a great job. It was really just Paul and myself working on that project during construction.
Yes, thank you, Andy. We were fortunate that we had a contractor that had a previous relationship with the school, a very good relationship, and that helped out tremendously.
I want to add, from a consultant standpoint, Paul is such an asset, and when we get to collaborate through the CA aspects, that's where you saw a lot of the clean attention to detail. It's incredible what you can accomplish, and I know, Paul, you never hesitate to engage the team and get to the bottom, of what's going on, and understand and figure it out and collaborate to get the best outcome. So I give Paul an enormous amount of credit after working on many projects with him. He
Thank you
really
very much.
does
I
an
appreciate
excellent
that.
job with the CA.
And what I would say, just to add to that, is listen to your lighting designer, especially when they give you details. Make sure those details get into your project.
Yes, that is a lesson learned on this one, right?
Yeah, even the smallest of detail should not be overlooked.
That's perfect. And that's the perfect segue for us to start asking our submitted questions. So the first question that we want to ask is, when is the best time during a project to begin conversations with your consultant?
I would say very early on, we engage our acousticians and lighting designers, in schematic design when the building starts shaping up, and working with Carrie and her team. They, it really is a collaborative effort. They bring ideas to the table. They have, while Paul and I work on a couple of projects, for 3 years. I mean, I worked on Nobles full time for maybe a year, and then half time for another half year. Carrie and her team are working on, I don't know how many projects. So they have hundreds of more precedents and they'll bring those to the table. We bring our ideas, and kind of, it starts to gel, late schematic design, early design development. And then by the end of design development, the kind of big ideas should be in place. And then in CDs, we're refining the details. And the same thing goes, goes with working with the acoustician. The earlier you engage the consultants, the better.
I can tell a brief story about something that happened early on in this project that I thought was a useful example of the consultant collaboration. I remember, I think it might have been at the beginning of DD or maybe at the end of SD, there was a real decision point relating to systems on the project, and thinking through, at the time, looking at technologies that were, this was sort of 2015, 2016, sort of at that time just emerging, and comparing VRF systems to chilled beam systems on some of the heating and cooling technologies. And of course, those have noise related implications. And we were really delighted to be able to be an integrated part of the team enough to help develop a comparative analysis, not just on the to complement the work that the mechanical engineers were doing on the project in terms of energy analysis and so forth, but also to do a comparative analysis as it relates to the noise in the project. So, sometimes if you've got the right folks at the table right at the beginning, you can bring all of that together to help a client make good decisions.
Another question we have for the consultant: what are the best ways to effectively communicate?
A great question this day and age. I would have said meeting in person.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. If we can talk about today, compared to traditionally, we would often, working specifically with William Rahn Associates, we would tend to have long thoughtful meetings with a lot of discussion, and we'd really look holistically at the entire project. I think in the current work from home or limited however everyone's working at the moment from remote places, we found that we've had to shift our collaboration and communication style. And so we've been finding more balance and success in having shorter regular meetings. And that's become a different style of communicating. But I think, Andy, we've just been doing that actively on one project. I'm doing that with Paul on another project right now. And it's been helpful to get our work heard. I think talking design problems is always the best form of communication. I really think that it needs to be a collaborative effort as opposed to just sending emails back and forth. Drawings. I don't think that really works. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, another challenge we have in the current state of the world is our office. We rely heavily on building physical models of these buildings. So we had a 1/4-inch model of this building that was probably 4 feet by 4 feet, where we have meetings with consultants. We can all stick our head in the model. You can do that in renderings. You can fly through buildings. The VR goggles is probably the closest, the best kind of digital way to do that. But we found that the building isn't designed, you have to get used to that VR process, and we're not quite there yet. So, we are still building some physical models, but it's not quite the same. But that's those in-person meetings with sitting around the table with drawings and physical models from past experiences, the
best.
The best way to communicate.
That's a really interesting insight, and that brings me to the next question, which is, what is the best approach towards achieving success in working collaboratively on multiple projects at a time? So, Andy, you touched a little bit on how, we've transitioned from working full-time to half-time, and you guys were talking about how you started this project back in 2016, right? A lot of stuff piled on, I'm sure, since then. What was that like, and what's the best approach for managing that productively?
I think it certainly varies from firm to firm. Where our office is it's relatively small. 40. It's usually 40 to 50 people, and most people in the office are working on multiple projects, but depending on the size, if we're working on a $200 million high school, you're likely going to be working on that full time. And managing the different projects, I don't know if there's a one particular best way to do that. I think it's a challenge for everyone. For I don't want to speak for Carrie or Ben, and they're working on, as I said, many more projects. It's a challenge. I guess I don't have a great answer for how to manage it in the best way. You just have to communicate closely with the clients, schedule meetings as a project manager, look ahead, just try to stay ahead of it. And, communication is key, and staying in close communication with all consultants and the owner. Mm-hmm. That's really the key to any project, but especially when you're working on multiple projects.
Yeah.
I can add from a consultant standpoint, since we do work on a high volume of projects comparatively. So taking tips from that, I think that it's really important for us, even if we're working on many projects, we think about what the learning that we have from all the projects and how we can apply them to everything we do moving forward. And so we think holistically about what's happening in design kind of simultaneously, and then every project frankly has to be prioritized. So we have to think about each project being equally critical and important to the mission of what we're doing, and pace ourselves with deadlines, excellent communication, understanding schedules, understanding expectations and deliverables. And one of the things that I think becomes hardest as a subconsultant is, and architects are on the front line of this, is getting decisions made on the client level that can facilitate the team being able to continue to move forward. And I know decisions that we have to make with the design team that affect the engineers, for example. And so we're always very respectful in backing out the deadlines so that they have enough time to do their work. So that all parties have enough time to coordinate. And it's really hard, but I think we all have to advocate for each other as shared collaborators on projects to make sure that clients can maintain realistic expectations, that they have to make some decisions in order to keep things going. So that's another thing I'd add.
That might, I totally agree, echo everything you said. And I would say it's maybe especially important in the time prior to COVID, the pace of projects seems to be increasing at an almost frenetic rate. Sometimes there would be, you know, not for every project, but certainly for many, a real push to move quickly. And when that push exists, it directly butts heads with any kind of inability for a client to make decisions. They're shooting themselves in their own foot that way. And so, I couldn't agree more with that aspect of things. You're absolutely right. The consultants work on lots of projects at once, and we do all we can to bring the lessons of one to the many. But in addition to the hallmark of any great management process, you know, high communication and steady communication, both internally and externally. There are some tools that can be useful for, you know, managing multiple things. We've found success in our office using Trello. There are others, Airtable and others that some have found useful in managing what is essentially a really complicated to-do list. And having that be shareable and linkable and interactive can be really handy.
Thanks to all of you. So as Carrie and Gabriela said, and then we were discussing before the beginning of this meeting, we know that the project started in 2015. So 5 years ago, it's like a long period for work in construction and in our society in general. So the next question should be like probably, it's about BEAM, and it's about, in the changing world of BEAM, how did the team use the platforms to communicate and collaborate? I assume, and we discussed, like probably there's no point at that time to use BEAM in 2015, but do you have experience to other projects that you can share how things are changing now with this huge platform that we've seen and more is used on projects?
Do the William Braun people want to talk about that first? I think we did do this one in Revit, didn't we?
Yes.
Yes.
But we weren't working in BIM 360.
No, we weren't.
Yeah, which I would say is probably the now where people are with a lot of projects, depending.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, do you want to speak to that? We have been working in Revit for a while now.
I think it's only recent that our consultants, like the structural consultant and the MEP, have started collaborating with us, sharing the models. You know, I know with our structural engineer, they weren't working in Revit. They were working, I think, two-dimensionally, and they used different software to do their structural analysis. And they hadn't made the leap yet to bridge Revit with their analysis software. But I think that's a fairly recent thing, at least in my experience working with our structural engineering. We're doing that now with the project that I'm working on.
I would add, as a consultant, that we are seeing more and more and more projects going into 360 and working live in models. The hardest part, we still, just because, again, as sub-consultants, we need to, again, stick to kind of clear communication and expectations on deadlines, because we don't have the luxury of getting to work only on that project for, you know, a long period of time. We have to kind of juggle it within our schedules. And so we need to be able to understand in the same mindset as milestones, classic milestones, like when are we going to be making major updates? When do we need to have a big push to get this coordinated? We do have occasional projects where they need ongoing updates, and we'll work that into our scope. But I would say it's more common that we'll be given expectations of when we need to have things updated and you know, for the team, and then just let them know. So I would say that it's becoming more live. It seems more, and Stefano, he works in the studio with me. He could probably comment on that too. So I'm going to have one of the moderators answer that question. But I see more and more projects going into 360, and so there's more interactive collaboration happening across all the disciplines at the same time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I can say that it refers even to the question of communication that we were doing before. BIM 360 is really helping from a form of communication and sharing information that probably with previous software, previous programs, it wasn't something you have to remember. Oh, I have to send a new file to the architect, or I have to send a new file to the lighting designer. Today is more sharing information on, okay, I did that, let's share it, and you have it immediately. It's something more that reflects actually the evolution of our society in general. It's everything more on a daily basis, on something now I have it and I share it.
Right.
And it's really helpful from a communication point of view.
Right, and I think how we described it over the years, we saw this coming 10 years ago, is that we said that the phases, that we were going to be blurring the lines, and it was just going to be going like this. And so we're working more holistically together just to progress the project. And it's I think it creates, we can't just purely communicate within a model. So that's not going to cut it. We have to be able to communicate in all our other forms in order to understand what's happening. So I think it doesn't remove that aspect, but I think it is making it easier for us to be able to be actively working on the latest information and be on the same page rather than any miscommunication or disconnect. So I think we're going in the right direction.
I think the one factor that in our office that pushed us into working in the BIM 360 environment is more and more we're working with associate architecture firms and sharing the Revit model. So we had to go into a cloud-based platform so that we could all work simultaneously on one Revit model.
Yeah.
This is a really good insight, and I apologize for the delay. I was actually taking notes of everything that you're saying. But the next question is kind of moving on from the design component to the sourcing component. So how best can the design team engage their manufacturer representatives and utilize the resources that they offer? I know from past experience working with HLB that you guys deal with that a lot. So how can you best optimize that use and that resource?
Well, if we want to start with that, since the IES is half of this, I want to make sure I'm just talking specifically about lighting procurement and the reps, and we can't do our work without the reps. We just can't. There's so much that we rely upon for them to be involved in our projects. So I would say that at the same token, I'm also going to put out there that we really are agnostic, because it really, at the end of the day, we're only really interested on getting the project to be the best quality and to really meet the guidelines, the expectations of the client, the budget expectations, the delivery expectations, installation, anything like that. So the best time for us to engage our reps is when we have already done our design work and we understand the design vision. Then we start to, so we already figure out what the design is going to be, and then we go in and start to look at what products we're going to use. So we might be, during design charrettes, showing the architects some interesting products as an example, but we really are non-committal about it until we get to the specifications. And once we get into design development, we're really looking, we rely on our reps for fast turnaround on pricing, and that's frankly kind of the name of the game in DD, and samples. Then when we get into CDs, that's where we're really looking for collaborators to help us get into the details. It's almost too soon for us to get in the weeds with them during the DD process. And I know that can sometimes be frustrating to reps because they're trying to kind of get involved. And we have to just make sure we can afford the project before we can start getting serious. So I would say that that tends to be the best approach for us, is to really get that preliminary information from them quickly. And so time is of the essence. I can't reiterate enough, like the communication back and forth with reps. We try to tell our team, if it's not a fire drill, let them know, because we're usually coming at them with a fire drill. So can you please let them know, I don't need this pricing right away. You can get this to me by Friday or whatever. Let them know, let them cool their heels a little bit on their own deadlines, because everything feels like an emergency to them. And so we try to be respectful and give them the benefit to be able to fit us into their very busy workflow as well.
Yeah, I think on the architectural side, we engage. It kind of depends on the project. There might be if there's a project where we've got let's say a south-facing facade where early in design we realize that there'll be a lot of glass and we need to design a external sunshade or something. We're going to engage the reps almost immediately and try to get something into the cost estimator's hands as early as schematic design, and then work with them to develop it through CDs. Then if there are other materials that we're used to using, or we might be engaging them much later. But hearing what Carrie said on the lighting side of things, we we always have to, the cost estimates we get back from lighting, the contractors typically don't go out to subs or reps, and so we just have a cost per square foot in schematic design, and probably in design development. Maybe we'll get some better pricing in CDs, but it makes sense that they're, the way Carrie spelled it out, in CDs is when you're really getting into the weeds, as she said, and the same thing goes for on the architectural side.
Yeah, there's an analogy for acoustics as well. I don't need to suck up the oxygen in the room. You guys have explained it well, but certainly that's true of materials, and we collaborate with mechanical engineers getting noise data for equipment, things like that. Yeah.
So next question. So what's an example of a challenge that occurred during the design, and how did you address it? Would you do something different next time as a result? Like lesson learned?
Lesson
learned, like you were saying before.
We had a lesson learned that we were talking about. Can I bring it up? So we had detailed, there's that beautiful photo of the of the reading room in the exterior. It's so lovely, and we were all thrilled. And Barrett had modeled it in AGI. It looked great. We had it all set. It was designed beautifully. We had gone through a number of design ideas, and we decided on the right design. We detailed it. We sent over the details. Somehow, and I would say I would put this as highly unusual, but somehow this one detail ended up getting lost. Yeah, if you can go to,
Go to
keep going.
the nighttime.
Yeah, the nighttime exterior from, yeah, keep going. That one. That one. So you know those beautiful little coves right there. So those are very small but powerful optical LEDs, and they're small and they pack a punch. So there's a lot of brightness to the lens. And so we had sent over, as we normally did, set of details for all the various aspects of the project. We're all good. Everything's good. I don't know how this happened, but somehow this one didn't get into the set, and normally we check it and we didn't notice, so I don't know what happened. So we got to the site, we were in construction, and do you remember, Andy or Paul, when we discovered what happened? But we had not detailed
I think,
the little
yeah.
the little shelf for it.
I think when they turned on the lights, you could just see the LED.
The diodes.
And it wasn't that we had detailed it, but the detail was literally like 1.5 inches off. So another little secret is when this photo was taken, Paul and I Paul, I think mainly, we got up on a ladder and installed a little piece of cardboard along the curving wall. We did create a new detail, and the owner chose not to move forward with it because it was a change order. But that was a lesson learned. It, as you all know, comes down to inches, and you got to get those inches right.
Yeah, so I would say that one of the hardest things is after the details get coordinated, it's probably like, Paul, you're really good at this because we've had lots of moments when we've had to kind of redesign a detail in the past. So I think you can't over coordinate that stuff. So, maybe what I would suggest is having, more conversations in early CA and just say, hey, we've been doing this like on some other projects where we just say, let's just have a sit down and go through and look at all these details and make sure they still make sense. And that's an opportunity for us to say, did that material change? Anything you want to fill us in on that we, somehow, because sometimes the project has some VA aspects that we aren't privy to, and we find out too late. And so it's really helpful if we can at least have a chance to sit down and verify. It's probably less critical for Ben. Well, I don't know. Do you feel the same thing? You have the same issues?
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't recall specific issues coming up on this project that resulted in major lessons learned. I don't know, Andy, chime in if you can think of one.
It was somewhat minor. There was some double-walled ductwork, I think, that we needed for acoustics that wasn't in there.
Yeah. So we did, that's right. I remember having a late stage phone call with you with maybe using your phone as a sound meter in one of the rooms saying, how close are we? And do we really have to go back and change this or whatever? So yeah, these things happen. Sometimes it's VE related. Sometimes it's just a missed detail. A lot of times, because issues of noise relating to HVAC systems is a kind of 4 or 5 party collaboration between the architect, the mechanical engineer, the mechanical contractor, the acoustician doing the noise control calculations. Sometimes if we're all around the same table, it can work out really well. But if any one of those parties doesn't fully appreciate what's necessary to achieve a low noise circumstance, you can get more noise than you expected. And so yeah, that is one of those things, noise from an air conditioning system that is doesn't show up on the architectural photography. It can be a little hard to catch. When you do catch a problem, sometimes the issue is buried up behind soffits and so forth. But that doesn't mean that there aren't details there that need to be gotten right. There certainly are.
Shout out to Kristen Murphy at Ascentec, who has been helping me a ton lately, as well as Haley Darst at HLB. I'm in the middle of CA with a project with both HLB and Syntec, and it's been great to count on their support during the chaos of construction.
That's nice to hear.
The next question is a little bit, it's actually quite specific. What was the connected watts per square footage for the project?
Right. So we had designed the project to 33% below code at the time, and that was at 0.9 watts per square foot connected load. I would say, again, keeping in mind the technology and the year that this was built, we now are seeing several projects are now getting lower than that. So now, you know, we just finished a project that was 0.65 watts a square foot. It was a 19-story building, tenant fit out. We finished, we're at net zero schools now. So I would say that we're now seeing probably down in the 0.5 to 0.6, 0.7 range more consistently. And I think now, though, I don't know how much more we're going to be able to max out just squeezing any energy out of LEDs anymore. It really is coming down to network control systems, better controls, you know, and just more daylighting, you know, all of that. That's where we're going next.
So let's move on to the next question. Still talking about 2015, what was an innovative use of technology in this project? Related, of course, to what was 2015, 2016.
You guys want to talk about anything architecturally that was innovative or acoustically?
I think one thing that we, back in that same reading room, I mean, I don't know how innovative, somewhat innovative, but it was more something we hadn't done before. You know, those curved ceiling panels, it looks like wood. It's actually a metal, perforated metal panel. But that ceiling is sloping, the plan is curving, and then each of those barrels are curved. So it's literally like taking a slice out of an ice cream cone and putting, you know, 8 of those in a row. That was a challenge, and you know, it's not just you know, curving like a simple piece of paper. So working with the ceiling manufacturer again early on, that led to a great result. That ceiling, when you're in there, it looks like you know, it looks like bent plywood, not a metal panel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think what else. Another you know, newer product that we used was on the exterior of the building. Gabriele, I don't know if you could bring the presentation back up. There's that picture of the quiet study room. You know, this, scroll down, keep going. I think it's the next one. Yeah, this image. You know, this building is in this woodland landscape. So we tried to select materials and colors that would allow it to fit into the landscape. This generally looks gray. However, when you're out there, there's this greenish hue to it. You know, we looked a lot at the pine needles in the trees and the rocks, and those are tactile panels. So it's a new product that we've, I think this is the first time we used it. It has a little bit unclear in that photograph, but there's this wavy pattern. It's a little bit reminiscent of tree bark, but when the light hits it, it's varied. You can see each panel is not the same color, so there's some variation from panel to panel. That was you know, something new we had not done before, a new material. You know, Ben, I can't think of anything out of the ordinary that was done acoustically. I know we had talked early on about white noise machines and things, but at the end of the day, you know, the client wanted us to, you know, keep it simple and
Yeah, I think that's right. There were some somewhat newer HVAC technologies that we, certainly had to think through from a noise control standpoint. Not breathtakingly new or necessarily, but newer, and that was certainly part of our work. And you mentioned the perforated metal panel in the ceiling of the reading room.
I think the other thing in the reading room was there's a displacement ventilation system in there, so the air, there's a trench below that room where the air circulates and comes out of the bench that's below the curtain wall. That reduces, that's better from an acoustic standpoint. That also allowed us to keep all, there's no ductwork in that ceiling, so that was something unique on this project.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, there's some efficiency advantages to that approach as well. And it's often the case that energy efficiency and low noise go hand in hand. Inefficiency, noise is one of the byproducts of inefficient mechanical system design. And so when you have more efficient systems, they tend to be quieter.
Mm. And I would add, even again, given that lighting changes so quickly, 2015, 2016. So those reading room uplights, I think, were very powerful for their scale at the time and the optical system. So I would say that was an emerging product at the time of having like a really good tight 10-degree beam with a lot of punch in that size was a relatively new thing. I think also just the dimming has so dramatically improved. And again, just with the transition of dimming at that time. And so it's layered in so many ways that you almost, probably similar to acoustics, that you wouldn't really necessarily observe on the surface.
That's great. Moving on to the next question. Are there any communication tools or software that you have added to your process since starting to work from home due to the pandemic?
I'd say Microsoft Teams. I always joke, whenever I used to turn my computer on, it's like, what's up with this Microsoft Teams thing? And I found out the first 3 days of staying home. It was pretty impressive. So we use that a lot, and Zoom, of course. Zoom, in my experience, has been slightly more reliable, especially having meetings with clients. But our consultant meetings are almost always on Teams.
I would add to that like my best friend is this pen that I can use on the screen. I use it all the time, and I get very frustrated because in Teams we can't draw on it nearly as well. So I actually like using Zoom or Ring Central or something else so that I can draw. But someone taught me a workaround recently. It's not that easy, but what I can do is I can just do a screenshot of whatever we're doing. So I snip it, and then I share my screen and I can draw on my snip. So not as good, but I found that to me, I can't really design and collaborate without drawing. So that's become something that has really been critical during the whole pandemic for me.
We are doing today, in fact, it's wrapping up in my office right now via Zoom. It's the first of a 3-part internal in-house seminar on hand sketching, recognizing the value and importance of hand sketching as a communication tool, and sort of working on our own kind of skill building in that regard. And so we've got document, you buy a little gooseneck thing to hold your iPhone and use your iPhone as a document camera so that you can sketch pen on paper and then share that image of that via Zoom or via Teams or whatever, and it works really pretty well. I use Zoom. I do a lot of teaching, and I find Zoom to be a pretty good teaching tool. It didn't start that way when we first all shut down and had to go online. It was hard, but it's gotten to be pretty good. The one other technology I would mention that we've started to use, we had it in place prior to COVID-19, but it's just, the use of it has just exploded internally, is Slack. And I don't know if other organizations use Slack as an internal communication tool at all, but it's essentially an amped up version of Instant Messenger, and it keeps your history, it's searchable, and it's turned out to be a really useful tool.
I wanted to just add, Ben, that our firm has also done a sketching workshop. I think we're in week 5 this week of it, which is hilarious. We're doing a 6-part sketching workshop with about 25 people who've joined. And I think there is a huge craving for teams coming together and doing something organic together, because we're stuck behind these screens. So I think that's a really, it's been very satisfying to everybody to get to do that.
Totally. There's a lot of rolls of unused trace paper around, you know,
Yeah,
let's get them
yeah.
out.
So we're kind of going old school. I
love it.
agree.
I love it.
Yeah.
I have found one big change with the Microsoft Teams is that we are all, the people on my team are much more likely to just call each other real quick with a question. Whereas when we're in the office, we don't do that. We don't think to pick up the phone. You know, we might walk over to someone's desk occasionally to ask a question, but it takes effort to do that. And then you feel like you're interrupting them. For some reason, it doesn't feel like an interruption when it's happening on Teams. Someone might call me, I answer real quick. Sometimes we share video, sometimes we don't, you know, and it's kind of nice, these real quick question, okay, I got the answer, and move on. And we do it a lot. So I think there's more internal collaboration happening as a result of us having to use these different tools.
I love this feedback. Carrie, I have to say, I have an active pen as well, and it's been an amazing companion this entire time. And interesting that you mentioned that roles of trace haven't been used so much, because I find myself, I'm drawing a lot more by hand these days, as opposed to having to, you know, model something or whatever, maybe because I'm just quicker and a little bit more able to just communicate that far more quickly. It's so interesting that you mentioned that. So our wrap-up question was actually about what is the most helpful tool you use to facilitate collaboration, which I think you've already all kind of addressed. So I'm going to flip that and just ask, you know, if you could advise young professionals coming into their first coordination efforts, you know, maybe, you know, let's say recent grads to 10 years in, what is your best advice for that person moving on? Because the reason why I wanted to ask this question is because it's so hard to teach somebody to coordinate. Like what is the best advice that you find from your position as the consultant, as the architect? What could you say to those people?
Just thinking back to I've been in this office since I graduated from grad school, and you know, I remember early on, maybe 3-4 years into the office, I was responsible for, you know, doing the construction drawings for 2 theaters at our Williams College project, and the project architect during construction was like, you never figured out like how to get the conduit and everything to the lights and the balcony rails. I'm like, no, I had to do that.
You don't know what you don't know, right? Yeah.
Right. I would just say keep asking questions. You know, as someone who's young working on a project, you know, you've got to learn to check the consultants' work, check their drawings. You know, learn. It just I think it takes more kind of study, and you know, when you don't understand what's being said around the table or on a Zoom during a coordination meeting, you know, feel free to speak up. You know, it's a funny profession. It just takes time, and then one day it's kind of becomes almost human nature. I will say, if you can, you know, the other really important thing when you're young is to get out to a construction site, so you see, you know, what you're drawing, what you're coordinating actually happening in the field. You know, I know from my personal experience after my, you know, I think there was one Milton Science project we did. I felt like a different architect after going through, you know, construction administration, because you're in that trailer, 7 a.m. at coordination meetings. a bunch of people who are like, this doesn't work, you need to figure it out. And it's just, you've got to go through that experience. But yeah, I would encourage everyone to keep asking questions and try to get out and see things being built.
One thing you learn a lot by asking a lot of questions that you learn over time is that everybody around the table in a design collaboration has an important perspective, a valuable perspective. And sometimes when there seems to be a conflict or seems to be a problem, if you're able to see the big picture enough and understand, this is, the ultimate goal that, this consultant, that consultant, and this other consultant are all trying to achieve, and they're approaching it from the perspective of their own expertise. Even if you're not an expert, and you won't be in their area, if you have, the germ of an understanding of what their ultimate goals are, then you can contribute to that process in a way that solves problems rather than creates them. And, I think that sometimes, a mistake junior consultants make in all fields, I think, is, that they, coming out of school or whatever, you feel like you have an answer, and this room, this is what it needs, and there's a beautiful naivete to that that I think gets polished a bit with experience when you come to understand that really there's a collaborative design process that comes about when the professionals around the table start to understand that everybody's perspective is valuable, and you don't have to fight against the lighting designer, if there's some sort of conflict, that there's an opportunity for both and.
I will add some thoughts. I think several things that have been said, I completely agree with. And I think absorbing like a sponge as much design information as you can, looking at built work. If you can go in person, awesome. If you can't, looking at photos, reading case studies, there's so much online, it's incredible. So I think just having a zest and a curiosity to learn more and build up your vocabulary. So understand architecture movements and what's going on out there, and kind of be a bigger part of the conversation. I think that's really helpful. So you understand design trends and classic design theory. And so I think it's important to always keep going with that. You can't just stop after you get out of school. I think being curious and having a healthy dose of being curious and asking questions, as others said, was really important. And at the same time, I also think it's helpful if there's a certain amount of you realizing that there are many times that you're going to have to kind of get out of your comfort zone in order to grow, and not be afraid of that. Like, there's healthy growth, and that's important. Is in order to grow, you're going to have to, like Andy said, go and get yelled at the trailer a little bit sometimes, or have them be like, you need to answer this now. And that's okay. So you can do it, and you can enlist your teammates for support when needed. And so always, rely on your team, rely on the people that are working with you, so that you come across together. You don't have to handle every situation by yourself. So I think don't shoot from the hip when you don't know the answer. So engage your teammates appropriately, and at the same time, realize that there are going to be times that you got to stretch yourself a little bit in order to get to the next step. And it's okay. I remember feeling like I was in the frying pan a lot when I was in my 20s. I'd just be like, oh, wow, there's a lot going on here. And I was working on 2 very, very large international projects early in my career. And I remember just sometimes lying in bed at night worrying about details and things going on, and that I might have forgotten something. And when I look back at that now, I realized that even though that was stressful for me, at the same time I was growing. And I was so fortunate to have those challenges placed in my hands, and I was able to, so I really always looked at it as, okay, well, this was a really, really good opportunity for me. So sometimes it's okay to feel a little bit scared, and we all go through that. I think there's a lot of us, when you're in your 20s and, until you've seen a lot of built work and you've worked on a lot of projects, you just feel sometimes like you're faking it until you make it. And that's okay. You know, no one's expecting you to have all the answers. They're expecting you to be excited and curious and wanting to learn and wanting to help the process.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And something I've always struggled with, and I still do sometimes, is I feel like I have to know a certain amount before I can ask a question. Like I don't want to look like totally like I don't know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you got to just ask the question. And this is a profession that, you know, is mentorship has always been a historic part of this profession, and people who've been in the profession, speaking for myself, and I know all of the seasoned panelists we have here enjoy helping younger members of the profession and get some pleasure out of being helpful to the younger folk. And so don't be afraid to ask questions. You don't have to know everything. And I sometimes have some colleagues in the office I work with, and they'll want to run an email by me before they send it because they're worried about wording something. I'm like, just send it. It's good enough. And they're like, really? Yes, it's good enough. Just send it. And it's just, don't be afraid to just ask questions. And so that's my message. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything. You can stumble a little bit, and you can admit that I'm not sure if I'm asking this quite the right way, but here's what I'm thinking about, and they can help you through that.
Actually, Paul, I want to add on to that one thing. I think another thing that's really important is to not be afraid of feedback as you're growing in your career at any time, honestly, that feedback is a really good thing and it helps you grow. So if you can seek out feedback from your mentors, your peers, you know, get, you know, look at it as an opportunity rather than looking at it as criticism, that it's just information that is going to help you move forward.
This is all great information, and thank you all. I'm going to let Stefano move us onward to the next phase of the panel.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like what Paul was talking, I really think of myself as a foreigner. Like you never like, I'm not just like an emerging. It's not like I'm not out of the school. I'm 37 already. So I work a little bit here, but I changed, for instance, 2 years ago, I moved to this country. I moved to another country from Europe. And I really felt myself when you were saying like, oh, people send me mails to question and to, can you correct, is this correct? And I felt myself like, oh, I'm not out of school, but I'm still like sometimes, oh, can you check if my English is the message I'm sending is correct? Or what am I saying? Like, I totally feel you. And I think it's something that it's really applicable to at every stage of the career, really. Sometimes for a reason or for another. And I really, it's something that I would like to add. I remember like my professor of history of architecture in Rome, he was saying, the first lesson said, it's 6,000 years that we started to make architecture. Has been built already so much. So just though it's not about copying, it's about look what has been done already. Remember that someone probably made something that you need. You just need to check what is behind you, observe a lot, observe what has been done from someone before you. I think it's not like, probably it's not a detail from the Egyptian, but why not? Or just something that has been done in a project before into your first. That's really like something that I felt to add. And I always remember this professor at the university that I said like, oh, that's actually right. So that's it. We can move on. And if there are like some questions from the audience, if someone like, I saw someone wrote something in the chat, or if you want to address some question now, we're here, and feel free to just speak out, and we're there. Actually, they're here to answer. I'm going back to see some of the questions in the chat.
I fished one from the chat here, which I really like. So as we talked about all of the tools that you've been using during working from home time, do you think that you will continue to use these programs after the pandemic is over?
We've found Slack so useful internally. I'm certain we're going to continue to use it for sure. I think there are other questions also, I think that we're just beginning to talk about coming to answers with in terms of how work from home affects the future of work, and people coming into the office 3 days a week rather than 5 or whatever. And I don't really know how that's going to shape our industry or whether it'll even happen in our industry. But I wouldn't be terribly shocked if there are kind of lingering aspects of this that continue to affect how we meet with our clients and with other design collaborators that include Teams and Zoom and whatever. I don't know. I don't know for sure, but I could imagine that there may be some elements of that. One thing that we've certainly appreciated in using these tools that I hope we do continue is the fact that Syntec has more than one office, and we are better knit together across our offices than ever before. And we are learning things from our colleagues in LA, here in Cambridge, that at a level and with a richness that we didn't have before. And I think in a sense we didn't know what we were missing. So I hope that we are able to capitalize on the best of these tools as we emerge from the pandemic.
I'd reiterate that too. I think we've similar to Ben. Our interconnectivity and our sense of working together as a cross-collaborative team, we were doing it before, we're doing it more than ever. And I don't think that's gonna go away. So we were already on Microsoft 365. So we were already in that cloud world, and we already were working on Teams. We're already doing a lot of this stuff anyway. I think I'm kind of like, thank God we had already done that. So if anything, I just think even if we end up back in the offices or a hybrid or whatever ends up happening, I don't think it's really going to matter, because I think we are still going to use a lot of these tools. And so if we happen to be away or at site visits or things like that, like I've got my little Loom Cube video conferencing light on, and I've got my pen and I've got my setup. So I think what we've learned is that these challenges are not insurmountable, and we can still design together. It is nice. I miss being in the room together. I miss looking at the physical models. I miss sitting across the table and collaborating in person. I really love that. But at the same time, if we don't have it, I still think we can do amazing things together.
One more question that I read here in the chat that I think it's very project related. It's in what ways that I found it actually interesting, where the architecture of the building that is very glass and the lighting considered relative to nighttime views, and probably like the leaflet design and the lighting considering relative to nighttime views. So the perspective from the outside, looking inside of the building, what I'm understanding from this question, and at least that's what I would like.
I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing the question, Stefano, but I think I heard what was the nighttime, like the nighttime impression of the building?
Exactly. So how,
Sure.
in what ways were landscape design and lighting considered relative to nighttime views?
Oh, got
because
it.
It's
Well,
a very glass building,
yeah,
and the perception from the outside, I think it was very important.
Sure. Well, Andy, I think pretty much on every project in the beginning, we always start with exterior nighttime building presence when we first chat, and then we move in, right? That's always the first thing. So I would say that that's pretty standard. We usually devote time just thinking about how we're going to perceive the building. And then on this project, we were not as concerned. There are many projects where we are concerned about it. Andy, I don't think we were concerned about the kids looking out onto the landscape as much on this project.
No.
Yeah, we were really just concerned about safety lighting and nighttime, so that the campus felt not overlit and appropriately lit at night. So I would say the landscape was more functional in this case, and the building serves as this central hub. If you remember in the early diagrams that Andy was talking about, this is really like the center of campus. So I would say that having it act as a lantern, as a beacon, and the campus as a heartbeat, that was really the function of the building, having this sense of glow.
Yeah, and we also knew that they would have events, it's not just a library, they would have, trustee events in this space in the middle of campus. So that lantern light-like effect was important. And the site lighting on campus is really kind of subdued. This might have been the first project I borrowed Carrie's light meter and was out there at night, checking the light levels on the existing pathways so we could figure out how few lights we needed to add.
Right.
So really trying to fine tune it so it felt right in that campus.
I would add another, if you can forward, Gabby, to the science building. I think it's a couple slides down. It's the science exterior shot at night. 2 more, maybe 3 more. That one on the left. This was another thing. So with this renovation, again, the exterior nighttime building presence, we really wanted to have this transparency and exposure to these physics workshops. And so, Paul, do you remember that we had to figure out the final detail on that front light? There were, we had some things going on there, but it was important to frame this so that it felt inviting, and we wanted to really, when you look, actually, if you go, is it up one slide? So this really translates inside too, is that transparency, that sense of science being accessible to all and unlocking the potential in people. So I think, Andy, you can speak to this more, but I think this has been a theme that we've been really working on for many, many years, is really, it starts at the building and then it translates into the architecture too, through light as well and glass.
Yes, that's certainly the openness and the transparency. Even in terms of science, when it relates to science, we started I think our Milton Academy Science building was the first one, where there was a real desire coming from the school to open things up, make it completely transparent. But it doesn't just mean put glass everywhere. On that project, there was a ton of glass, but there's some nuance to it. We used acid etched glass in certain locations to afford more privacy. But that is in terms of our work, making public civic spaces that are open to all, that are transparent, that are just nice to be in. That's what we strive for, and we're all working towards that, making that final building as functional and as beautiful as as we can make it for the community where it exists.
I just want to add to get that transparency, it does require careful evaluation of the insulated glazing units that you're using on the building, because there really is, even a minor difference in transparency really translates to a very different appearance on the outside of the building in terms of how much you can see into the space.
I would also just add that I think the connection with the outdoors, it's such a theme, and the accessibility, having people feel welcome to these projects, light and landscape and glass, they all, and architecture just all work there. It's a common theme that we see. It's so powerful to people as you said, Andy, in these civic buildings. So they have to be thought of like kind of holistically by the design team. To understand and have these be relatable spaces inside and out for people to enjoy the outdoors when they're inside, and vice versa.
Well, this is, I think, a great stopping point for this panel. I want to thank the panelists once more for all of your candid responses and having you here sharing your work really means a lot to us. So thank you, all of you, Paul, Andy, Ben, and Carrie. Thanks for being here. Thanks for IES for being an amazing partner on this journey. Third time's a charm. And if there are no other questions, we thank all of our participants for joining us tonight, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Nice seeing
Thank
everyone.
Take care,
Thanks, everybody.
everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.